The USSR and Cuba became allies in 1960. In April 1962, Americans placed Jupiter missiles in Turkey. October 14th, 1962, American spy planes fly over Cuba and take photographs showing evidence of Soviet missile sites. Day 1, October 16th, 1962, the United States analyzed the image taken by a spy plane. Day 2, October 17th, 1962, the United States begins a troop buildup in a southeast quadrant. Day 3, October 18th, 1962, the Soviet foreign minister met President Kennedy at the White House, assuring Kennedy that the missiles were purely defensive. Kennedy knew this was false, warning of the consequences if they were offensive nuclear weapons on Cuba. Day 4, October 19th, 1962. Advisors continued considering response strategies. Day 5, October 20th, 1962. President Kennedy orders quarantine of Cuba. Any Soviet ships heading to Cuba holding weapons will be turned back. Day 6, October 21st, 1962. The president meets with General Walter Sweenley of United States Air Force Tactical Air Command. Day 7, October 22nd, 1962. After a week of waiting, President Kennedy officially addressed the nation to inform them about the presence of Soviet nuclear missiles in Cuba. He also informs the nation of quarantine of the island to prevent further offensive equipment from reaching the island, stating that the quarantine will not end until the USSR removes their missiles. Kennedy wrote to the leader of the Soviet Union, Nikita Khrushchev, "I have not assumed that you or any other sane man would, in this nuclear age, deliberately plunge a world into war which is crystal clear no country could win and which could only result in catastrophic consequences to the whole world, including the aggressor." Day 8, October 23rd, 1962. United States ships moved to block entrance to Cuba. Soviet ships inbound stopped for the most part. Day 9, October 24th, 1962. The Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev called the United States quarantine as an act of aggression, stating, "You, Mr. President, are not declaring a quarantine, but rather are stating forth a ultimatum and threatening that if we do not give in to your demands, you will use force." Day 10, October 25th, 1962. The United States calls an emergency meeting of the United Nations Security Council. The United Nations Security General called for a cooling off period, which President Kennedy rejected because it left nuclear missiles in Cuba. Day 11, October 26, 1962. Missiles on Cuba became operational and construction of more missiles continued. Fearing an attack from the United States, Fidel Castro suggested to Khrushchev that the USSR should attack first. Day 12, October 26, 1962. In a letter to President Kennedy, Khrushchev agreed to withdraw missiles if Kennedy promised to never invade Cuba. The United States took Khrushchev's first offer. Day 13, October 28, 1962. The Soviets publicly agreed to remove all missiles from Cuba. All Soviet missiles were moved from Cuba in the beginning of November 1962. By that time, the embargo with Cuba had ended. The Jupiter missiles were removed from Turkey in April 1963.